can hear us, I mean, we're just going to start the space immediately. Let's just move straight to the main topics, Musa, if you can hear me. I mean, yes, election 2024 is around the corner, and we all see what is happening in the nation. And so today we have met to look at three important issues that matters most to Ghanaians, and we are asking very simple three questions. And the three questions that we are asking is, what are the burning issues on the minds of everyday Ghanaians? How are these concerns, reflected in the polls? And most crucially, are we looking for continuity of leadership, or would there be a shift? That's what we're looking at today. Musa, first of all, let me ask from you. You've been doing a lot of polling things. What are the top three issues that Ghanaians consistently cite as priority for election 2024 based on the polling data that you have?
Right. Norman, thank you very much for having me, and welcome everyone. The top issues that we've seen over the years that hasn't changed has been economy, jobs, and education. These have consistently been on the minds of voters for the past 2.5 years, since we've been polling from January 2022. In some cases, you could see jobs surpasses economy, but in very rare occasions. We've seen that happen twice in our polling cycles, but it has always been economy as number one, followed by the jobs and education. And if you look at the original analysis of this kind of this data, they are largely the same. But what you tend to see is that in the rural constituencies or the regions that are not highly developed, you find education a bit higher than it does so in the urban areas. So broadly, these are the national priorities for voters when it comes to election 2024. Hello, Novan, can you hear me?
Wow, interesting. So you talk about the fact that the first thing is the economy, right?
Yes.
Musa?
Yes,
Yeah,
can
we
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you very
Yes.
loud and clear. So you said economy, education.
It's economy, job, and education.
The first thing is the economy, right?
Yes.
Musa? Yes, we can hear you very loud and clear. So you said economy, education.
No, your line is very bad. It is economy number one.
Okay, so my next question to you is, how has the economic situation in Ghana influenced? Bear with me. We're having a bit of technical challenge, but we're trying to resolve it. So what I'm asking again is that, how has the economic situation in Ghana influenced voters' sentiment, and which demographic groups are most affected? If you can answer that for me whilst I try to resolve the technical issues.
Okay. We have seen consistently that it is the economy that has influenced the way voters are behaving for the past 36 months. Indeed, if you go back to polling history, January 2022, the race was very close between John Mahama, if you match him, against NPP's Dr. Bawumia, even when you match him against Alan Martin. But it wasn't that wide at the time. But in April 2022, remember things happened in April 2022. They passed the e-levy. That was the beginning of the IMF discussions and the economic downturn. So from that point, when the e-levy was passed, then the poll numbers responded in a very aggressive way against the ruling party. In fact, the data we have collected over the years has shown that clearly that economy is an issue. Then remember in 2022, I think sometime around October, there was a free fall of the cedi. That also had a huge impact on the polling numbers. And then when the cedi made a stunning recovery in December 2022, remember, we also saw a very positive response in the polling data accordingly. So the polling numbers had responded to various economic events in the country, and it has continued to do so till today. When people feel a bit relieved, when prices stabilize, when fuel prices come down, when big things begin to look brighter, you tend to have positive feel within the country. And the first thing you see affected is the direction of the country. Those who believe Ghana is headed in the wrong direction begin to head south, begin to fall. And then those who say right direction begins to go up. And then you see corresponding increase or improvement in the way people perceive the president is doing his job. It has direct impact on that matrix. And then also you begin to see the impact of on that development on those who say that things have gotten worse in terms of their personal economic condition. So these are linked to economic events, which eventually influences people's voting intentions.
We are having some technical challenges. But Musa, let me ask you again. I think the people will bear with us. We'll try and resolve these technical challenges as soon as possible. I mean, our first page was hacked. Let me put it on record. And we had to quickly, try and then get these things resolved. Now, my next question to you, Musa, had to do with looking at to what extent does corruption and governance rank as a deciding factor in this election? Because yes, you've done a lot of work, and we want to know what extent has corruption played a role in the kind of poll that you have done over the period. We want to know what role has corruption played here.
Right. Unfortunately, in Ghana today, corruption hasn't ranked very high in the ongoing polls. Indeed, it responds to events when it comes to corruption. The highest point we've seen corruption rise was during the past case, which was widely reported and widely investigated. It spiked and then began to recede. What you will notice is that, look, when people are faced with dire economic situation, when they are faced with joblessness, corruption on its own will not be a big issue for voters. Why? Even though it should be, those who speak against it, either they are politicians or whoever they are, have not been able to link corruption to where we are today in terms of economic mismanagement and unemployment. How do you link corruption to economic mismanagement? How do you link corruption to joblessness? Until we are able to do that very well, the voter will see corruption as a distance issue or non-starter, and just that, yeah, they've stolen the money, so what? We want the jobs, we want the economy to move, and so on and so forth. So I think until we are able to do that, corruption will not be very keen on the agenda of voters. Indeed, if you look at the recent polls, it ranks at like 6 or so, behind roads, healthcare, and healthcare, and sometimes taxes. So it's not really ranked very high in the polling for the past 2.5 years. No.
Okay, that's very good, Musa. Let's move on to looking at security concerns, issues of security in this country, particularly in the regions affected by conflict, shaping voter priorities. So you know, if you go up north, and even in Accra, of course, we have what we call the hotspots in the country. So I'm trying to find out from you, are security concerns also seen, apart from the fact that you've shared with us the first three most important, things that are shaping the discussions and matters or of priority to Ghanaians as far as this election is concerned. So for those of you who have just joined us, economy, jobs, and education seem to be a priority on the line. But then let's have a look at how are security concerns, particularly in regions affected by conflicts, shaping voter priorities, Musa?
All right. Let's look at the recent polling data that we have in the last 2 weeks. Now, when it comes to priority of voters in terms of security, the region with the highest concern will be surprising is OT. About 5.9% of voters are concerned about security. In fact, no, it's voter region, 6.8% or 6.9%. Western North is 6%. OT, 5.9%. Eastern, 4.4%. Bono East, 10%. Bono, 6%. Ashanti, 2%. Ahafo, 2%. Now let's look at Upper East. Upper East is 2% concerned about security. You know there's violence there, there's trouble there, but they're at least concerned about it. And then you have Upper West, 1.4%. And in Northeast, virtually nobody was concerned about security in Northeast. Northern region is 1.3%. So it appears that those of us in the South are more concerned about security than those in the North.
Does it mean that the security situation really is not a problem? Even in these areas with all the security concerns that are there, people don't really take that as a priority for themselves. Is that what you're saying, Musa? If you look at the trends that you've done in these areas, because I was thinking that, okay, so if you went up north, we're expecting. I was thinking that if you went up north and you did a polling, their priority areas should be different from what would be, let's say, if you took a place like in the Ashanti region,
That is what you would expect. But surprisingly, from what we have done, I think it clearly shows that for those who are there, maybe it's because it's in a very small part of the country, and Ghana is very big, relatively. So in the midst of everything, maybe it's not registering. But maybe if you take a special study in the specific localities where this violence is happening, you may find a different story. Remember, this is a national poll, and the emphasis is not really about the specific small area. So that sample limitation must be borne in mind here.
Okay, now let's move, Musa. Let's move to look at on political parties and candidates. Okay, now we know that the two leading political parties seem to be doing very well. That is, we know the NPP and the NDC are the ones who are leading. Now, let me ask you this: is there evidence of voter fatigue with either of the major political parties? And could this open opportunities for any third party candidate? If you look at your polling numbers as it is, some people, we know that the agenda for, let's say, the independent candidates, and they've all said, look, it is time for us not to mind these two major political parties. It is time for you to allow us to come in and we can do a better job and all that. Do you see any apathy or fatigue with either of the two major political parties?
Yes, there is evidence of apathy across the political divide or the political lines. Indeed, if you look at the recent polls, what we can see is that nearly half of those who say they would not vote are the floating voters. And then another 20% or thereabout are people who don't want to disclose their party affiliations. But we believe these people to be mostly disgruntled MPP sympathizers. Now, about 17% of these people who say they will not vote are MPP voters, openly admitted MPP voters. And just under 2% represent that of NDC. So what we expect this to suggest is that there will be high turnout among the NDC folks and low
Great.
turnout.
Now let's move into looking at your unpolling insight. My first question to you, Musa, and I think that most people on the call, listening anonymously or live on the call, want to know what polling trends do you see regarding urban versus rural voters? What are the trends that you see?
There
This
isn't much difference.
the 2024 elections.
Look, there isn't much difference between the key issues that face urban voters and rural voters. In the urban areas and the rural areas, largely they've converged around the economy. When the economy bites, everything else goes down with it. So there isn't much difference between the two. Even in the stronghold of the MPP in Ashanti region, they still complain economy is a top issue for them, but they're still voting for the incumbent. So in some cases, yes, the economy will play a crucial role, and indeed, in many cases, especially in the regions that are not any party's stronghold. For example, Greater Accra, Central region, Western region. We've seen some movement along this line from Ahafo as well. Ahafo is becoming a bit liberal in their thinking and their voting, and to some extent, Bono region, and that could impact the election that we're gonna have in the next coming days. So, if you ask me, frankly, the difference between the urban and the rural votes in terms of the economy and other issues that are driving decisions are not different.
Let me just inform our listeners that whilst you're on the call, what you can do for me is that you have any question or if you have any contribution to the discussion that we're having, what you can do is to tweet at Nova Reports and leave your comments there for now. We will definitely read your comments or ask your questions for you. And then also another thing that you can do is that if it happens that you are still on the call, at some point we would allow you to come in with your questions and answers. But for now, let's try and then deal with our main guest. Now, Musa, how, or if you look at, has voter turnout been a consistent challenge in Ghana's election? What do your predictions indicate for 2024? Because I'm looking at the voter turnout, i.e., let's say even from 2000, okay? So 2000, 2004, 2008, and then we came to 2012, 2016, 2024. If you look at the trend, would you say that voter turnout has been consistent over the period? And if so, or what are your predictions telling you for 2024?
You know, in every 8 years of any government, the turnout of voters is suppressed or depressed. You expect to see lower turnout in your second term when you are facing your potential break the 8 or whatever that is. That has been shown to be the case historically. So if you look at 2008, there was lower turnout in that election compared to the subsequent ones. And in the 2016, similar thing happened. And interestingly, when the turnout happens, it affects the incumbent government or the government in power. In 2008, it was the NPP voters who frankly refused to come out and vote. In the 2016 election, it was the turn of the NDC not to come out and vote. It is no different from what we are seeing currently in the polls. The NPP is doing the last 4 years, their second 4 years. They are at the end of the 4 years and they want to break the 8. And it's no surprising that turnout among their supporters is low, whereas that of their opposition or the opposition candidate or opposition party is extremely high. So this pattern would continue into the future. So what we are seeing now is exactly what has mirrored our past election cycles, where the ruling government is coming to the end of its second term.
That's beautiful, boss. It's very interesting. I mean, insights that you are sharing with us. I just want to go through a few of the motions, and then what we'll do is that we'll come back with the follow-up question. So, I mean, listening to you and looking at your polling insights. Now, let's look at this. If with what you've told us, looking at the trends and the turnout as it is. Now, are there noticeable shifts in voter loyalty among traditional strongholds of the NPP and the NDC? We've seen like Ashanti region. We see your prediction that says that the NDC may be getting close to about 30% and NPP dropping, even though they are looking at hitting over 80% to be able to win the national elections, because per their analysis and per a lot of predictions, anytime they cross the 75% marks, they are likely to win the national elections. They just need some few votes over there. So share with us. And I want to pick on some few regions for you to, go deeper as you try to answer the question of, has voter turnout been, are there noticeable shifts in voter loyalty among traditional strongholds of the NPP and NDC? And, you look at the voter region, you look at the Ashanti region. Yes, of course, we may want to take a look at regions like the central region, take a look at the bonus, the eastern region and the western region. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of, loyalty? What are the shifts that you are seeing over there?
All right. You see, to begin to speak about loyalty, you must always ask yourself, what kind of voters do we have these days compared to the early 90s, the beginning of Fourth Republic, 2000s, 2010, and now? What people must first understand is that demography of voters don't remain static. It does change. We do indeed have a huge number of our voters below the age of 35 years, making up close to 70% or more of the voting population. These are people who are millennial, Gen Z, and so on and so forth. So their affiliation and attachment to political parties and ethnicity is waning compared to the old days. So the syndrome of, say, I was born in it, I will die in it, is gradually weakening. And that is what our political class must wake up to understand. Now, this changes in demography has been the cause of what we are seeing in the softening in the alliances that people or the parties naturally receive from their the so-called strongholds. Let me single out Ahafo. Ahafo has been very loyal to NPP, but in recent times, we've seen a shift in partisan affiliation in Ahafo, to the extent that now NDC and floating voters outnumber those who say they are NPP. That is a shift. Bono, the same. So you could see that those who had traditionally been seen to be NPP loyalists are beginning to change. And what is driving this? Younger voters. And indeed, we have seen from the data, when you ask people which party would you want to link yourself, associate yourself with, as a younger person, as a younger voter, because you've never voted before, those who openly say they are going to affiliate with NPP has been declining. And we have seen a significant increase in those who say, as for me, I am a floating voter. He's never voted before, but he doesn't want to be seen as NPP or NDC. And these are the developments that, if it continues, you're going to be having a situation where NPP and NDC will have very few loyal people. And that is when the true democracy of this country will probably come to fruition. If you take Ashanti region, look, they may not like NDC, but they may not also openly and wholeheartedly queue in the early morning to vote for NPP. And those people, we've seen some of them staying at home. They will not vote. And we've just seen some of them drifting towards the Afafranto and drifting towards Nana Kwambe Jakucheda. And indeed, we can see that Cheddar is nearly on 5% of support, and Allen 2%. So between Allen and Cheddar, they are doing a combined 7%. Their numbers are not coming from voter region or OT or the northern regions or Greater Accra largely, but mostly from the Akan regions, Ashanti region, Eastern region, the Bono region, Bono East, Ahafo, Western region. So these are the areas that are supporting these two candidates and giving them the numbers that they are on right now. Why? I think it's because of the loyalty. The loyalty the parties have for these parties, people have for these parties, is changing. And the earlier they realize that, the better. They must position themselves in a way that they don't have to rely on loyalty to really win election. And indeed, when economy is tough, look, people's loyalty will be tested. And this election will be one of them.
Very well. Musa, let me ask you this. Since we are looking at polling insight, I just trying to be ignorant a bit here. How accurate have past polls been in predicting Ghanaian elections? That's your past polls that you have done. And what are the lessons that you have learned from them over the years? We've had people come to attack you and said, look, you what you're doing, you are just sitting in your room and you're trying to put some figures together, and just put it out there. How accurate have past polls been in predicting the Ghanaian elections? I know you predicted the 2020 elections. You said the current president was going to win by 50% plus something, how accurate has it been, and what are the lessons that you have learned from it?
Right. Let's start with the history. Why did I set up Global Info Analytics? I am a finance person, a risk person, and a chartered accountant. And I know how investors value certainty or knowing the horizon without interference. And I also felt that the political environment we have here barely relies on data. Purely hearsay, propaganda, nothing guides anybody with regards to data. So I felt that, look, I need to set up this company to do just that. Sample opinion, do market research, and provide investors with what we call political risk analysis. Why would I set up a company to do political risk analysis? by telling us propaganda. No investor will pay you a penny for doing that propaganda. No. And indeed, our income has come from investors who want to know what is going on and also understand the political risk across the West African sub-region. Now, what has been our history or track record? In 2020, we predicted using the polling numbers that Nado was going to win with 50.4% with a margin of error of 1.9%. So if you apply the margin of error, we realize that we are dead accurate. However, within the same poll, we also realized that we got it very wrong when it came to Mahama's numbers. The poll was saying that he was going to get 35.something%, but then there were about 9% of voters who were undecided. And we kind of assumed that they were going to break in a normal way, and that would put Ronaldo wherever he was in the election. But in fact, I would say about 90% of the undecided broke away in favor of Mahama. So he overperformed his polling numbers. So we have learned some lessons from that. And we are using that lessons to model how we're going to predict the next election come next week when the polls come out. And then we did the predictions for Kumewu by-election. We were spot on. We did the predictions for Ejuso. We were spot on. We did the predictions for Asin North. But Asin North, what we realized was that the race looked too close to call at the time. But looking at the insight we had from the data, we concluded that regardless of the fact that it is too close to call, we believed the Chikwesi was going to win because of certain things we saw in the data. And indeed, the Chikwesi won. In the NPP primaries, we had sampled over 4,500 delegates, randomly calling them across the country, the polling station executives, those who had the final say. And we said that Baumel was going to get 58.4% plus 1.9 margin of error. And Kennedy was going to get 40.4% plus or minus 1.9 margin of error. Indeed, the rest is history. We knew what happened. We were dead accurate within the margin of error. And indeed,
Musa, how do you feel,
Yes, go ahead.
How do you feel about, when people seem to want to attack you and say, hey, what you are doing doesn't make a lot of sense. We don't like what you're doing and all that. You're not giving us the right information. What you're putting out there is wrong information. How does these kind of comments come to you?
Norman, it doesn't do me anything. I'm very much aware this was going to come. It is the occupational hazard. But we've always stood fast. We've always made sure that we work ethically with a rigorous methodology. That at the end of the day, the methodology will always vindicate us. And we are very confident that whatever we put out there has been well analyzed and well thought. Look, we have in the last 7 months spoken to over 200,000 voters across this country, different polling. So we know a lot more than we have put out there. And we are running this survey that we have done into a model, an AI embedded system. So we're not just going to rely on what they told us, but we're going to also rely on what they said to us in many other parts of the questionnaire, especially for those who said they are undecided. We would decide how they would vote. And that will be determined using our AI tools. So we're going to be able to say that, look, even among those who said they are undecided, we believe this is how they behave based on certain indicators we've seen in the data. So, look, nothing really demoralized us as a team. Remember, we are a company, so the company has no blood You can insult the officers, Musa Dankwa can go away, and another person will come, and the same methodology and rigor will be applied, and whoever comes in here will speak to the data. We have no sentiment for any data. Indeed, look, I believe that at the end of the day, posterity will judge us kindly.
Very well, Musa. I mean, I can sympathize with you. I mean, doing a great work, but yet still, you have all these challenges, where when it's good for a particular group of people, they hail you. When it's not good for them, they come to attack you. That is even the job of journalism. That's one of the things that you must understand, especially for you who is dealing with data, which people feel that will also play a role in deciding, in people's deciding for this thing. Let's look in two questions in the area of swing votes and regions. And then what I'll do is that I'll bring in some of our other people or special guests who also have expressed interest to want to share their thoughts with us, as far as these data and its impact on the elections is concerned. Now, Musa, let me ask you this question. Now, honestly, if you look at the data in front of you, which regions or constituencies are likely to serve as the tipping point in this elections based on your own analysis? We want you to share with us and tell us why you think these regions and constituencies. So probably what you do is that you can give us the regions, and in each region, just look at one or two constituencies that you think are going to be the tipping points or will serve as the swing regions or constituencies as far as the 2024 elections are concerned.
Okay. The regions that will be critical, and if I may quote the government a few months back, he said Accra will decide who wins the election. I think what he said is true. It will also be very important in this election, Ashanti region again. Because if Ashanti doesn't come the way it should come, then it will play a crucial role in knowing the outcome very early. Central region remains the battleground. And it's very close in Central region at the moment. But it is more tipping NDC way than NPP. And Western region is another area that could be very, very uncomfortable for the ruling NPP. But for the NPP, it is important that Ashanti region comes through, Eastern comes through. Unfortunately, what we are seeing doesn't suggest that they will come home strongly. And indeed, if you look at the numbers Bediako is gaining, it's quite huge. Look, if you get 1% vote in Ashanti region, 1%, it's not a small number. And at the moment, the polls have shown consistently that it is impossible. I'll use the word. And I think people don't like me using the word impossible. MPP will get 85% that they've set for themselves. But that will require the NDC to collapse, entirely collapse in the region for them to hit that percentage. And NDC voters largely are loyal in the region. They are guaranteed at least 24-25%. That number will not shrink. And if the turnout among the MPP doesn't really materialize, then the NDC 25% could become 30%. And that's the danger that the MPP must guard against. Eastern region, because of the Krobos in that area, is not that straightforward for NPP, even though they've always won it. We may see a bit of turbulence there this time around because of apathy again. And indeed, we've seen Nana Kwambedia could do well in some areas. And in fact, in some extreme circumstances we've seen in the poll, even though in an electoral area level, it seemed to be polling ahead of Mahama in certain parts of the Eastern region. So it turned out to be something interesting that we're going to witness in this election. And I've always said that people who rely on historical trends, we may have to throw their trends down and look at the future. And 2020 will not be a trending election.
Interesting, Musa. So now let's look at this other question. And I want to get your thoughts now. What role do undecided voters play at this stage in an election like ours? What strategies are parties using to sway them? Now, we've seen Dr. Bawumia just left the Ashanti region, spent 15 good days there. And just from there, he's heading straight to the north, back to his home region. Now, we saw that even in the 15 days that he was in the Ashanti region, the NDC flag bearer, that is John Mahama, Mr. John Mahama, the former president, His Excellency, was also in the Ashanti region, in and out of the region, moved into the Eastern region, which is supposed to be the second stronghold of the NPP. We understand he would also be swinging back to the north, which is also his home region as well. So from the readings that you have, these undecided voters, whether in the urban or rural areas, what strategies are you seeing that is being used to sway them, if you've come across any?
I think what I have seen from the campaign messages is that they are treating everybody as the same. They are brushing everybody with the same brush. And that is a mistake maybe both campaigns are committing while they are embarking on their campaign. You know, the floating voters are very discerning voters. And when you run an advert that appears to have some lies and inconsistencies, it puts them off. So some of the adverts both parties are running that may have half-true stories in it could not be doing them anything good. But they play a crucial role. And indeed, if you look at the data now, and we've always said that NDC, MPP on their own can't win election in this country without the helping hand of the floating or the independent voters. Indeed, that has remained so. And we've seen a gradual increase in their number. Now, I think I estimate about 20% of voters are independent voters. And that is very, very material. And we believe that going forward, it may go up further than that, because among the younger voters, they are more aligning to floating voters than to MPP and NDC. So this would keep growing into the future. And hopefully they will begin to, they will probably outnumber MPP and NDC. That's when we'll probably see a proper politics in this country, when that happens. Because you can't take them for granted any longer, and that you cannot rely on your base or whipping your base to just win an election. That will not happen in the future. Probably in the next 3 or 4 election cycles, we will see that happening.
Interesting. Now let's go on Twitter and take some of your comments that you've shared with us. And after that, I'll be coming to you, Dr. Ishmael Dodo. Before I come to you now, Dream It, right. He said, hello, doctor, please. I want you to elaborate on the deciding regions for this election. Is there a chance for the NPP to win the general elections with Ashanti region and Eastern region alone? And what are your predictions for the northern and central region? So, Musa, hold on with that. We'll come back to you. And then we also have Lambon Barabas. He writes, what matters most in this upcoming election is all around the economy, jobs, morality, and justice or rule of law. Ghana has lost her dignity in recent times, and our democracy is under threat. There's another one that says that, please, I would like to know among the candidates who are aspiring for the president but have limited chances, but also are king makers in this election. Who decides who become president? These are your questions. So, Musa, you hold on for me with that, and then let me go to Dr. Ishmael Dodo. Dr. Ishmael Dodo, thank you very much for making time to join us this afternoon. I know it's morning in the United States. You are listening to us in the US right now.
Yes.
So now let me find out from you. I mean, you've worked in the FDI sector and all that. And if you look at, there are Ghanaians who are in the US wished if ROPA was working, they would have been voting in these elections. We haven't gotten there yet. Hopefully, there's a party like the NPP that has said that they want to work on the ROPA to get it to work. It was started by President Kufuor in the NPP party. The law has been passed, its implementations and all other things, functioning out all the modalities has been a problem over this year, since 2008 up to this point. That hasn't been done. We're hopeful that if that is done, then you can cast your vote from the US someday when we have to, vote in an election. Share with me what you think are the reflecting issues of international concern. If you look at the FDI's perspective that matters most to Ghanaians.
All right. Thank you very much, Nova. Before I start, I would like to commend Global Info Analytics and the work that Musa just expressed. It is refreshing to see that a Ghanaian-based company, a grassroots Ghanaian-based company, is emerging to be one of the stalwarts in the prediction of elections in Africa. And the work that he's doing has been very well accepted. And I've seen it in other circles throughout the international realm. They really take into consideration his works and they read through it. What is very refreshing is this consistency in the scientific methodology that he uses and also trying to improve it over and over again. I think it's very commendable, so I want to put that straight. Back to the question, I think there are a lot of concerns internationally, but particularly among the diaspora population. You will recall that the incumbent, the NPP government, the current president and a team did quite a good job in the year of return. And so it drove a lot of diaspora coming through to Ghana. And there have been significant investments, believe it or not, but several diaspora community, especially in the area of real estate. And some of them are beginning to look at real-time investment in the productive sectors of the economy and take advantage of it. So elections such as these, as Musa pointed out, becomes concerns to everybody because they want to make sure that there's a bit of certainty in who, in the horizon and what the election will mean and how it's going to help them to foment their investment, consolidate it, and scale it up and grow it. So the issue of the economy is really important. One of the things that has raised a lot of challenges for the diaspora is seeing the way the cedi depreciation goes. It is also looking at the rule of law system. If we don't get our justice system right, in the impression that we are getting that, even the Supreme Court tends to go in a certain direction, and there are challenges with rule of law for businesses trying to get adjudications, justice in any incursions that they have with partners in Ghana. All these things create a lot of upheavals, and they are looking to see, okay, what is the horizon going to look like? And then the whole issue of foreign direct investment. If you look at the Ghanaian economy, before an international, a diaspora want to come in and invest, most of our monies that we get, we have to take it from external sources. Now, to drill money from the US, for example, to Ghana will require a lot of things. One of them would be what is the microeconomy looking like? What are the prospects in terms of the opening up of the various economic sectors, and who is saying that I'm going to invest in that area, and so on. And from a look of things, I think that there's a bit of refreshing trend that of certainty, there's a certain clarity that the Ghanaian election might go in a certain way. So I seriously believe that foreign direct investment might want to flow. But what is important is how Ghana position itself very well to be able to attract this in terms of the new government that will come through. There are a number of things that you need to do. Number one, you have to be very clear in the policy directives of which areas of the economy you want to develop. I believe that there's a lot of opportunity to grow the value chain agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, and strengthen the micro fiscal space to enable jobs to be created, enable scalability, and even economies of scale in terms of surplus for manufacturing and export, to take into consideration the markets that Cote d'Ivoire, Burkina Faso, and others may have that we can take advantage of. So, business people want to really look at that. They also want to look at how we're going to deal with the issue of rule of law, particularly when it comes to strengthening the justice system to be able to adjudicate fairness and justice in support of investments that will come to the country. So it is very, very important that judicial reforms and some of the constitutional reforms that some parties are talking about might be very helpful in helping, especially from the NDC side, some of the things they talked about, that the instruments that they want to put together to bring reforms to strengthen the rule of law sector. I think that would be very helpful. Believe it or not, ROPA is a very big issue, but most of the diaspora community are traveling to go and vote. We've been there to register and are coming to vote, and so you will see a lot of Ghanaians and from the diaspora actually coming down to cast down their vote. And I truly believe that the info analytics is correct. The vote is moving trending in the direction of NDC, not because they are political party, they are NDC, but they're beginning to see some of the policy instruments that NDC is putting together might help. Believe it or not, the 24-hour economy is actually resonating very well because they see the opportunity in it, the opportunity to create jobs wrapped around manufacturing sectors, wrapped around the agribusiness sector. This idea of Operation Feed Yourself, food security, value chain, and targeting certain cash crops and also food crops that they can take advantage of. There are others who are really looking at technology agriculture, for example, looking at to be able to grow the vegetables and things that people want. So they are really, really an interesting situation. But one of the things that I will end by saying that we need to keep an eye off the impact of the galamsey. Why am I saying that? Because the galamsey, the extent of the damage would affect food security because of the contamination of the soil, and you need a productive base for this. It also affects the energy sector. It also affects the health sector, and it will create a very bad impression of a country where part of it is actually, non-productive, to use, for lack of a better word. So, how the emerging ruling party incumbent or leader of the emerging winner will be able to articulate a set of measures to contain, because I'm saying, being able to clean the system, bring back the ecological system, looking at conservation strategies and so on and so forth. These might help in leveraging new types of green instruments such as SDG, Sustainable Development Goal bonds, carbon trading, carbon credit, environmental social government investment, and all of these things are very, very important from the FDI perspective. So, in a nutshell, this is what the picture looks like. I would also, if we have the time, I also make comments on the new president of the United States, what Trump, his policies, and what it will mean to Ghana, and in terms of how Ghana can position to maximize it. Thank you.
No problem. We will look at that later on. I think that we need to have a space to actually look at, the Trump and his policies and how it's going to affect Ghanaians as well. So, we don't want to bring that into today's discussion. is mainly looking at a topic that is looking at the polling trends. Now, let me bring in Sir Benjamin, if you are there. If not, let me take these comments, and then a question that was asked, I would pose to Musa to be able to answer it. Now, this is a very interesting thing that I'm reading. And the writer says, hello, I am an Adventist. And for some weeks now, preachers have been emphasizing on observing the Sabbath and linking this election to the scripture in the Bible, aiming to sensitize members to observe the Sabbath day on 7th December. Then he poses a question by saying, to what extent do you think adherence to such doctrine, will affect this year's election with respect to sabbatical churches in Ghana, especially in the Ashanti region, which has a lot of these churches? So, Doc, be on standby for me for that. But let me go to the question that was posed, and Musa, if you can unmute yourself. The question was, can you elaborate on the deciding regions for the election? Is there a chance for the NPP to win the general elections with the Ashanti region and Eastern region alone? And what are your predictions for the Northern and Central regions? Musa?
All right. Who decides? We all decide, because every little vote counts. So you can't discount one region and say, oh, I'm going to focus here. But you need to make sure that when you are winning in your stronghold, you win big. And that would compensate for maybe some losses that you may incur elsewhere. So everybody is important. But in terms of extreme importance, Ashanti region is extremely important for NPP, not for NDC. Eastern is extremely important for NPP, not NDC. But NDC will get what they're supposed to get there anyway. But it's the NPP that has to outperform their numbers. Now, the next three have always been the swing: the Greater Accra, Central, and the Western region. In terms of importance for MDC, I think it's going to be Greater Accra, the Western region, and the Central region. I think they will do extremely well in Greater Accra, very well in the Western region, and it will be a very close election in the Central region. Can MPP win elections by just winning Eastern and Ashanti region? No, they can't. Why? Something happened in the COVID era, 2020. In 2020, the share of voter region vote declined by almost 400,000. And some were attributing it to the Togolese not able to come to Ghana to register and vote, so that has meant that the number has gone down. No. We saw a corresponding increase in Greater Accra by 500,000 or more. It was realignment of population from voter region to Greater Accra, because the elders who traditionally have gone to their hometown to register and vote could not go because of the restriction on traveling and the pandemic. So they stayed in Accra, and wherever there are a good number of them, MPP lost those seats. And it is the reason why Ashanti region has gone down, because look, over the years, those of you in diaspora could bear testimony. You have come at a point in time and managed to put your name on the register. And you do come during Christmas time to vote. During the COVID time, there was lockdown in Europe, and even though lockdown was lifted, people were not having the resources, the money to travel to Ghana just to register and vote. So Ashanti region numbers went down. That has meant that Greater Accra is now the biggest region with the largest share of voting population, not Ashanti region anymore. So those kind of dynamics have shifted. And the situation where we saw MPP nearly winning the election in 2008 with only two regions will not happen again. They need every region to contribute. And that must be borne in mind. So you cannot do that. What's the next one? Yes. So broadly. Now SDA, issue of SDA. And this also, in fact, I have not thought very well about where they are matches spread in the country. And I think I will do that from the data. if they are going to observe the Sabbath, and indeed my brother is also Rastafarian, he doesn't go in on Saturday, so he will not vote. Even though he says an NDC guy, he's not going to vote. Now, these religious observations could have impact on MPP because the polls recently have shown that MPP does well among the ethnic.
Very interesting. Musa, there's another question for you. And this time the person writes. Give me a second. Let me pull up the question for you. But ladies and gentlemen, this is what you can do. If you want to be able to ask a question or you want to contribute to the discussion, you're allowed to also come in and share your thought with us. So just send us a request. We would make you a speaker, and then you can come in and share your thoughts with us. And so, but we're reading what we have. This one says. At Andy AJ writes, myself and many others in the Adventist family are not voting in this elections. And there was another question that was for you. He said, what matters most in this coming election is all around economy, jobs, morality, and justice in the rule of law. Ghana has lost its dignity in recent times. I think I have read that. I have read that particular one. There was another question. He said, okay, I'm an Adventist. Yes, we've read that. So you can join us in this discussion by, sending us your request to want to be a speaker, and then we'll allow you to come in. So let me go to now look at data interpretation and impact. Data interpretation and impact. We'll be wrapping up shortly. Musa, let's look at it. How should citizens interpret the fluctuations in polling numbers between now and election day? How should they be able to interpret that?
Data would always fluctuate, but the truth lies in the trend. So as numbers go up and down, yes, that is what polls are supposed to be doing and showing. But then in between, the trend line is what matters. You see, when somebody is in an area campaigning, there is euphoria. And that euphoria will turn into, I'll vote for him, I'll vote for him. When that person leaves the area, the euphoria goes down and the numbers come down. So when you are in that area picking the polls, you have this kind of what we call statistical noises. They won't last for long. That's why it is good to use the averages of the poll to see where actually the polling numbers are. So yes, somebody will drop, somebody will go up, but over the long term, is the trend line that matters. And the trend line has consistently shown that the opposition party's candidate in April 2002 led in hypothetical race 53% to 38%. 2.5 years down the line, he is on 52% and 40.5%. So you can see that as far as he is concerned, nothing really has changed.
Well, interesting, Musa. I think that there's an issue that is becoming a problem that must be looked at. And if there's anybody with civic education, that is civic education, if there's anybody with us, I think that they have to begin to quickly move in and see how they can resolve this matter, because we're getting a lot of tweets. And there's one that says that, senior, there's an arrangement by my church that we should bring our food to church on the 7th of December, so we won't go home after church. Unfortunately, they have put, on the 7th of December, emphasis of the church is the Sabbath is holy and hence has to be observed no matter what. And he writes again and says that a lot of programs too have been scheduled on the day of elections. That is 7th December. And you see, it's because the 7th of December is a Saturday. is a Saturday, and the Adventist people, don't joke with their Sabbath day, but voting is a civic responsibility. I mean, the question now is, what arrangement has the church done by even joining, if I want to say, the security forces? Because you know that prior to election day, what we have is that security forces, people who are nurses and doctors, special, there's what we call special voting, which is done for the security forces. Some media men who be working on that day, and for that matter, they cannot go out and queue. What kind of, plans have been put in place to ensure by the leadership of the church itself to ensure that members would exercise their civic right in elections of this nature? And there's a church, and it's the Adventists that are being called out here. You see, my challenge is at the Bosumchi constituency, where Kuntinase SDA Church is. I mean, they've been called out on Twitter. You can read all the comments that are coming. A lot of programs too have been scheduled for that day, and they are preaching Sabbath day to be left holy. And I think that if you ask my opinion, maybe what a church should have done, especially when they go to know the election day was going to be on the 7th of December, was to begin engage the Electoral Commission and the security forces and see if they can be given special dispensation and allow them to be part of the security forces to take part in the, what we call the special voting. So that at least if they took part in the special voting, then they can cast their vote before that day, and then on the 7th of December, they can be there. So NCCE, National Civic Education, should look at how to engage the leadership of the church, because members would want to exercise their civic right and decide as to who become the leader of this country. Now, David, right, in the last election, NPP numbers in the 3 northern region keeps rising. Can it be a decider for this election? Good question that you posed there, David. I think Dr. Ishmael Dodu, you like to comment on this issue of the SDA Church, preaching and being very insistent that the Sabbath day must be kept holy. Yeah,
thank you very much. Just like to make a reflection. As a former senior diplomat of the United Nations, and I've seen elections in over 36 countries in Africa. There have always been a situation where for religious reasons, especially when the day of election falls on a Sunday or on a Saturday, that it raises concerns and questions around what do we do. Typically in Ghana, there have been many times where the elections have fallen on Sundays, and yet the elections have happened. And what the school of thought here is that it is a civic responsibility. It is also a constitutional right that you need to be able to step in. It becomes a situation where you're looking at your religious versus your constitutional right, but your right to existence, your right to freedoms, your right to elect the leadership of your country is as sacred as your worship on a Sunday or on a Saturday. Now, if one of the arguments that I remember came out in one of the countries was that even in the scriptures, Jesus Christ healed somebody on the Sabbath day, and it was questioned, why would he do that? And he asked, if which of you, when your sheep or your goat or your property get lost on a Sabbath day, that you've seen it, you won't look for it. So I think that it is the same argument here. It is a constitutional right. It's a right of freedoms for the people who are members of the church, and Jesus Christ would ask the same question.